everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unfocus after almost a year. Hope you missed us.
Hope you missed us, guys. This is Zubair checking in after a year. I hope you guys missed our
Yeah,
voices.
I certainly didn't.
I didn't
Anyways,
miss my voice either. Every
yeah,
time I edit like these these episodes, I'm listening to myself and I'm like, yo, you screwed up that word, you screwed up that phrase. Why'd you cough in the middle of your talk? Why'd you clear your throat? Like, I'm very critical.
yeah. For me, it's not even the individual words. I don't even get to that point. I just hear like the way it sounds, and I'm like, I don't sound like this. Why do I sound like this on a recording? But it's like that is how I sound. Whatever. Can't do much about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a year, and I think it's worth mentioning. It's not as if we like intentionally just said we're not going to record anything for that year. Like we experimented with various things actually. Remember, there's a point where we were trying to do it in person again. We got new mics just for that purpose, which I still have one of them, and they're just too
Oh yeah, I
quiet
have
or
that one
something. I
too.
don't even remember.
We had
Yeah,
to, so we bought
yeah,
like a different set of mics. And I think some people might know the type that we're talking about. I think they're called the SM48s, and they're basically like those typical like concert mic looking mics. Like they have like that drumstick kind of look to them.
yeah. But I just think of them as stage mics because they're pretty much the mic that you see people using on stage, right? Or yeah, and
Yeah,
yeah, that didn't
exactly.
work
Those
out.
stage mics. It didn't.
Yeah.
What was the problem again? I forgot like what the issue was.
I think they're too quiet. And if we really wanted, we could have probably gotten something to boost them somehow, but I don't know. It seemed like a hassle to do it at that point, so we just backed off from the idea. But it's okay. We're back to old reliable. Um, yeah. Apart from mics, though, I guess it's worth mentioning from our end that we're kind of slightly different format or approach from now on. We used to have like really long episodes in the past, right? I mean, they varied, but like overall, they were just kind of long. But now it's like they'll be a lot more compact, I think, right? Like we said something like I don't know, like what's like it's unlikely that we'd ever go above like 40, 45 minutes or so, you know. So and
I
we'll
think
try
it's
to
also worth mentioning.
do things.
I think it's also worth mentioning that we like before. I think you and I had this kind of threshold that we wanted to cross. Like we wanted to hit at least maybe 30 minutes, but now that all that's out the window. Like if an episode happens to be like 15 minutes long, it's gonna be 15 minutes long.
Yeah, which is honestly a lot like makes it a lot easier to actually release stuff because there are many times uh, where like we'd record something, we'd talk for a bit, then we're like, we ran out of steam, or we'd like, I don't know, then we'd re-record, and then the next time we recorded, we'd like go on for too long, and then we wouldn't want to edit that day, and then we wouldn't release, and yeah, so it's like I think we're gonna have a good balance now. Yeah, if you want, Zubair, we could just get into the topic now, unless you have anything else to say. I don't know what the topic is today, by the way. It's a surprise for
Oh
me.
yeah, okay. So I kind of there's this question I've been thinking about a little bit. I haven't given it that much thought, but I kind of saved it to an impromptu discussion between us on this podcast. And it seems so. It's a bit of a simple question at first, and I think questions like this usually have a simple answer, and then you have to like dig deeper, and then once you dig deeper, you find like more varying answers and like different sides to the question. So it's one of those seemingly simple questions, but then there might be something underneath. And
Yeah.
the question itself is this: what is the purpose of art in our personal lives, in our lives generally? But I say
Okay.
personal because I want to emphasize the individual and not the society or the culture,
Okay.
right? I'll give a bit of context just to kind of build up the the question. But essentially, so you know that art plays a cultural role and a social role, right? Like art
Yeah.
kind of what it does is it kind of takes what's brewing in the society usually, and then it kind of encapsulates it in the form of art, like music, paintings, photography, and other types of art. And not just that, of course, there's also like artists who dream something up that's different, or they kind of push something forward that people are not necessarily thinking about. But nonetheless, what it does is it brings something into the social fabric or into the culture that is either new, or it kind of documents what's been happening at the time. In some way, it's kind
Right.
of like biographic of the society.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's like the kind of the purpose, or one of the purposes that art plays in a social way or in a cultural way, macro, if you will, in a macro way, but kind of in the micro sense for the individual. What is the purpose of art? And I'll let you kind of think about this question.
Okay, so first of all, are we talking about from the perspective of the one, like the artist, or the viewer, or both?
I was thinking more so from the perspective of the artist. You can take this
Oh, okay.
however you want, but I think I was kind of focusing more on the artist's point of view.
Okay. Like the artist who's actually like creating the art, like what is the purpose of that art in their life, or like to them?
Yeah.
Uh,
And also, I'll put
okay,
up like I'll put up another kind of boundary, or some
sure.
kind of restriction. So I don't mean art as a financial, um,
Yeah, yeah.
practice, like something for making money, like not a business or your career. But I just mean like art. Like if you assume you're an individual who had your finances taken care of from another job, or you just didn't, art was not your main thing for making money, and yet
Right,
you still made some form of art. What is the purpose of that art? Like, or not that
right.
art, but the purpose of you going through that practice and you like practicing art, creating things, learning to kind of express something in the form of art. And actually, like, immediately self-expression is one of those purposes, but I kind of want to like dig deeper a bit.
Okay. So I think first of all, it's worth between the process of actual. Okay, like there's several things I want to distinguish here. One is like the process of creating the art itself. Um, One is the art like kind of as an abstract entity, although I suppose that's not directly linked to the individual, but it's still, I think, it's worth thinking about. And the third is about like the relationship between the art and the viewer, or like in the sense that like when someone makes art, usually they're making it for it to be seen by someone else, right? So, but that's a separate thing from like when you're making, like, okay, if someone is painting or taking a picture or composing a soundtrack or whatever, and they complete it, but then somehow like it gets lost or deleted, or I don't know, and no one ever sees it. Like there's the question, like if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, does it make a noise, that kind of thing. I think in the case of art, it's kind of yes, because the artist is like the first viewer, right? It's like even if you make art, which is not viewed by anyone, which is kind of bizarre because we think of that as the purpose of the art. It's like the process of creating it itself, or like envisioning what you want to create. That has some significance to the artist themselves. Now, I haven't like answered exactly what that significance is yet, but like I feel like it exists somehow.
Hmm.
You can comment if you want.
Okay. Yeah. So I mentioned self-expression, right? Which is like essentially you want to bring something out into the world, right? That's in your mind,
Yeah,
right? So whether
yeah,
that is an idea for a book, which can be considered a form of art, whether that's like some kind of photo or painting, it's kind of lingering in your mind, and you want to like try it out and make something and kind of crystallize it into the world, right?
right.
Now, as for like the purpose behind that, you mentioned like, okay, what if you did not have an audience to present it to, right? Um,
Right.
I think I think there's something about going through the motion, or something about going through the process of making art, even if there's nobody there to like appreciate it besides you.
Yeah.
That is a way to like organize your mind. And this is like
Okay.
a theory or hypothesis that I have. It's a way to like organize your mind. Taking
Okay.
things that are floating around in your mind and kind of sorting them out, right, in a logical way. Even if the nature of that thing is not really logical, like you could consider like an abstract painting. There's nothing like
Yeah.
logical to it, but in some way, I think that by making that painting, that abstract painting, you're taking some portion of thought in your mind and you're kind of like unraveling it, right? You're kind of taking it from like it's like bundled up nature, it's spaghetti nature, and like sorting it out into like individual strings.
Right. Okay.
And I'll
So
give a I'll give a
yeah, go on.
before you comment, I'll give an example that I can take from my personal life, and that is photography, right? So some people might know I take photos and I edit them. Sometimes, occasionally, I'll post them like online, usually on Instagram. And
Mm-hmm.
the thing about the photos I take is that there's no real like purpose to them. Like they just look nice. And usually like they're photos from like either from trips, like places I've been, or I just happened to have the camera with me at the time, and I just found like a nice angle, right, and I just took the photo. When it comes to like editing that photo, and editing is where I consider the art to lie in photography, at least for like the way I do it. When it comes to editing,
Mm-hmm.
I think I think the reason I'm kind of drawn towards photography and like doing the editing is that in some way it lets me process the moment, right? So
Okay.
when I'm changing the colors, or like the white balance, or if I'm like, adding this kind of element to the photo or moving that, like it kind of lets me process that moment or that environment in a way that if I was just passing through it, I wouldn't process it, right? And whether or not
Right.
I upload that photo, whether or not it gains like an appreciation online or not, like that's kind of secondary to me. Of course, I like when that happens, but the process of doing the editing lets me kind of um, organize my thoughts surrounding that environment or that moment.
Mm-hmm. So I think okay. So when you mentioned, because you said uh quite a lot there, like starting from the beginning of what you said, like while you're talking, I think you mentioned that like the idea of art as a way to organize someone's thoughts, right? And like when you mentioned that, like what I realized is, so there are many kinds of art, right? And I don't even mean like in terms of the medium. The medium is like almost like the least important thing here. I mean the like what you're trying to do. Actually, no, I guess medium matters to some extent. Like let's say painting is a good example of a medium because with painting, like you have all kinds of what's it called? Like it's not schools, right? It's like styles or whatever, right? Like you've got like abstract art, you've got impressionist art, you've got the paintings or like Mona Lisa type paintings, right? So you've got paintings where like you're trying to mimic something as closely as possible, right? Like painting a portrait. And although that is art, I would argue, based on my limited knowledge, that it's like the almost like the least creative type of art. Because although it takes skill to do it, and like the end result could look beautiful, it's like you're not creating something new. You're just, it's like before you had cameras, that was the best way to just copy something that already existed, right? So, like the idea of like art being a way to organize your thoughts, that doesn't really apply in that case. But then if we look at the other types of art, like impressionist or abstract, so I feel like with something like impressionist art, that kind of matches what you're saying about like editing a photograph, where like you have the source material, but you're not being 100% faithful to the source material. Like you're like what's more important than the like exact like I don't know RGB values in any given part of the picture is like almost like the feeling that it evokes, or like what it makes you think of, or like this we have this idea that like if you were to look at a tree where like the leaves were rustling in the wind, the way it looks at any given point in time is not that important, right? Like the exact position of the leaves at any given point in time is what's important is the fact that there are leaves at all, and that there's like the sun like kind of reflecting off of them. The exact intensity of that light is not important. What matters is that like it's intense and it makes you feel that warmth or something like that, right? So it's like
It's more of like
whether
it's more of the focus on the
right,
essence of the thing rather than what it looks like to the eye.
yeah, like the same way that like if I tried to draw a dog right now, and even if I was good at drawing, like it wouldn't be like the drawing that I produced off the top of my head without any reference would not actually look like any dog that exists. It would just be like almost like an archetype of a dog in my mind, you know. It's like I've seen all the dogs I've seen, and somehow in my mind I have this abstract version of a dog, and when I write it or when I draw it, I'm trying to like extract that from my mind in some sense. And so that kind of art, I would say yes, it like your idea or your hypothesis of like organizing how you feel about something or what you think about something, kind of roughly speaking, definitely applies there. Um, I'm curious about abstract art or music for that matter, which is like kind of inherently abstract, right? Would you say that is also like organizing some kind of thoughts? I feel like it might be, but I'm trying to like get a sense of it.
Yeah, see, the thing about abstract art and music, anything that is abstract in nature, I feel that like if we're going along like with this theory of like art organizing thoughts, uh, then I feel like with abstract art, it's kind of trying to organize some subliminal thoughts. So not necessarily thoughts like that are on the surface, like not thoughts that you could necessarily put into words. They're more like
Right.
thoughts in your head that don't have that aren't like you know they're not on the surface. They're not something that you can like write about, for example, right? Although
Yeah.
I think like if you put in some kind of thought, you could kind of approximate the thoughts in the form of writing. But they're more so. I think what I'm trying to get at is the feeling and the essence of the thoughts themselves, like
Yeah.
the experience of the thoughts, if that makes sense.
Right.
And then by doing abstract art, by making music, for example, you're kind of organizing those, let's just call them, I guess, emotions, right?
Yeah.
And you're casting them out into this medium that is like music or abstract art.
So when you were mentioning like the idea that it's like you're trying to capture some kind of emotion or idea which is not easy to express in words, but which you express in this other medium. Uh, like when you're mentioning that, I just thought of something kind of interesting, which is the idea of like the name or the title of a song or a painting, right? And sometimes it feels like these titles or the names or whatever are just like an afterthought. Like, okay, it needs to be named something. It needs some kind of identifier, so people just name it. And sometimes I'm sure that there are literally lots of songs or paintings out there called like number 143, whatever. It's like it's the
Yeah.
143rd painting that person painted, so they call it that, whatever. And someone will try to ascribe meaning to that, but I think like for most of us, we can kind of agree that okay, the artist had to put a name, so they put a name. But then you'll have plenty of paintings where they have an actual name, like the melancholy of time or something. I don't know, right? And so
What's that one that I think it's called Melting Clocks, right?
there's
It's
melting
literally a
clocks,
painting
yeah.
of melting clocks.
That one is surrealist, which is like a whole, I don't even know, a different kind of
Yeah.
category. But then, but like if we're sticking with abstract art or music for that matter, it's like when you give a name to whatever you produced, it's like the name is not a substitute for the product itself. Of course not, because like the thing that you're producing is so much more rich than a single name or title. Like you'd the equivalent in terms of text for a song or for a painting would be like a poem, right? Which is more than just a title. So, but the name still has a purpose, right? It's like it's kind of like the artist, like without the name, it's just something. The artist just puts it out and it just exists. With the name, it's like you get a glimpse into their mind. Like I like to imagine that there are cases where the artist starts with the name and then produces the painting or the song or the whatever.
Mm.
And it's like they're
Yeah.
trying to figure out how do I express this in whatever medium it is that they choose, right?
Yeah, and you know what?
So,
So going back to my photography example, because that's like the experience I can relate to this. Um, there's one photo that I uploaded last month, and as the title, I put Sonder,
Yeah.
And Sonder, I think like it's defined as the feeling or the realization that um, people like other than you are experiencing entire lives, right? So it's not just you who has a full life full of memories and challenges and aspirations. Other people, every single person on the face of the earth has those challenges and those aspirations and like a past, right? And
Yeah.
so with
Yeah.
this photo, which I titled Sonder, I put in the caption Sonder. It's a nighttime photo I took like in Halifax of a foggy street at night, and you see a car. You see like two houses on the right side. Each house has like windows and doors, and there's some light peeking out through it, right?
Right.
Now, when I was editing this photo, I didn't necessarily like. I think the feeling of Sonder came out through the process of editing, but it
Right.
wasn't that when I started editing, I was like, yes, I want to give it this feeling of Sonder, right? And I think that's
Yeah.
what I'm trying to get at, which is
Oh, okay. Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
you have like thoughts and emotions in your head, either they're in your head or either they're kind of like when you look at an edited photo, it's what comes to
Right.
mind, but it's not quite visualized in your head yet. It's not quite organized in your head. And then through the process
Right.
of the art, in this case editing, it kind of forms that emotion forms or that thought forms, right?
Okay.
So when I was editing this photo, um, eventually like so when I first started out, what I was actually thinking of doing was giving it an overall like a reddish tint, and I want to go for something more kind of uh, how to say this, almost like I wouldn't say evil, but kind of something that would look unsettling in a way,
Right.
right? But then the more the more I edited it, the more I kind of like worked on it. I just I just felt like the photo felt more like the what I eventually titled it, which was Sonder, right? And then I kind of emphasize those parts of it. So you see light peeking out through the windows, yet you see no people. You kind of have
Mm-hmm.
the essence of people living, but there's no person
Yeah.
in the photo. You have a car there, which signifies people. You have the houses, you have the windows. All that is signaling people, but there isn't like a person in the photo. And instead, it's focused on the essence of kind of people existing in their own bubbles. I think is what I'm trying to get at. What else like trying to get at in the end.
So yeah. Okay. I find it interesting that you're saying that you didn't have Sandra as the idea at the beginning, and in fact, you had a totally different kind of vibe that you're going for, and then Sandra kind of just emerged as you went along, which makes me wonder, like, so let's say there's the art itself, and there's the feeling that it evokes, or like the idea or whatever that it represents, and I'm sure you've got cases where someone starts with the idea and then they want to put it into visual form or something, or vice versa. They just go along, they create something, and then they're like, okay, what should I title this, right? Or probably there are cases where it's like, in fact, I'd say your case is not even that neatly, like it doesn't neatly fall into either of those, because it's like you kind of had something in mind and you're going in that direction, and then you're kind of like pulled in a different direction by what you saw, and then the idea emerged, and then you kind of went further in that direction. So it's like it almost seems like there's almost like some kind of inseparability between these two things, like the idea and the actual object. And maybe it's worth trying to contrast art with something else, where it's like you have a more clear separation between two things. I guess like okay, let's say you're trying to write an essay, a persuasive essay. Okay, not even like a creative one, on some topic. Like you start with a well-defined topic, and then it's not fully deterministic. Different people write the essay differently. But like given a certain topic, it's like you have to research. Like you have a rough sense of what you need to research in order to write about that topic. The facts are going to be the same for everyone. It's just going to be like how you word it, I guess. Um, but it's like over there, it's like you have that kind of clean separation between the two, right? Like you have this topic and you kind of want to produce the essay out of it. Whereas with art, it's like it's never quite like that. Like you can't have some kind of algorithm to take a topic or an idea and just turn it into an artwork. I mean, okay, yeah, you can. I know we know that there's AI like that does that kind of thing these days, right? Like Dolly, but
Mm.
that's just one. Like there's like the AI's interpretation of what a prompt means is not the correct interpretation. Neither is your interpretation, neither is mine. That subjectivity I think is like kind of important here. Like it's so interesting because it's like yeah, in the process of like editing your picture or painting or producing music, you feel a sense of clarity. Like okay, I managed to express what I wanted to express, but at the same time, you did it in such an individual way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you know what? I
In a
think
way that's so unique to you.
clarity is a good word for it, cause yeah, like this is kind of what I felt when I do edit a photo, and I kind of really zone in to the process of editing. Like when I start off with the photo, it's like kind of like a mesh. It's not anywhere near like the final product, of course. And there's so many directions you could take it, and it just seems like something that doesn't quite hold much potential, right?
Right.
But then once you start working on it, eventually when you get to the final product, there's like this sense of clarity, or not even when you get to the final product. There's like at some point in the process of editing, let's continue with the photography example because that's what I can draw from.
Yeah.
Um, at some point in the process of editing, you kind of commit to a certain idea. Like that idea kind of pops out at you from the photo
Right.
or that emotion. And then once you commit to it, like that's where the clarity hits. Like you kind of get that sense of clarity. And then everything downstream of that moment is just kind of expressing that emotion or that thought or that feeling in a
Right.
more like impactful way, kind of emphasizing that thought.
Yeah. And it's like going back to what I was saying about like there's still that individualism, right? Which to me what that means is like let's say you've got all people who exist and you've got all possible like let's say concepts or ideas that exist. But then with art, so perhaps I'll go back to something like to clarify like what I'm trying to get at. Like if you tell like I was saying with a persuasive essay, if you tell two people to write a persuasive essay on why um I don't know why we should care about climate change or whatever. Like the the two essays will not look that different from each other. Yeah, the exact wording will be the same. If the wording sorry, the exact wording won't be quite the same. If it is the same, plagiarism, right? Like the essence of it will be kind of the same, right? The facts, the whatever. And so it's like the individual in some sense does not really exist in that essay. Whether it's written by me or you or someone else, like yeah, it might be slightly different, but the essential message is going to be the same either way. It's not about what I think about climate change. It's about climate change. It's not about what you think about climate change. It's about climate change. But with something like with art, it's like the I is essential in there. My
I'd argue
interpretation of
I'd
this.
argue that
But
even with essays, there's an element of what the individual thinks.
yeah,
That's why
that's
you
true.
get the
Maybe
persuasive side to it, unless you're
maybe
just kind of creating some kind
let's say
of
not even
report, right? If you're
not
kind
even
of
a persuasive
if you're
essay.
using just data.
Yeah, let's say an
Okay.
expository essay. Better version. Yeah. So it's like
Okay.
yeah, with an expository essay, it's like or like a news article or something where you're trying to avoid any bias or spin. It's like, yes, the ordering of in which things are stated will be different. The precise words which are used will be different, but the essential facts will be the same, whether it's me writing it or you writing it, right? And so
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
individual doesn't really exist there. Whereas with art, it's almost on the not exactly on the opposite end of the spectrum, because yeah, there are things which are like almost universally agreed to like sound good, for example, with music, or to look good with art, or to like, for some reason we all kind of associate blue with sadness. I don't know if that's a cultural thing or an actual biological thing, but whatever. But still, like, there's so much room for like the individualism of like, what do I think this? What does this mean to me? What does it mean to you? Right? And so it's not about just about me. It's not just about the topic. It's about the relationship between the individual and the topic. That's kind of like the opinion I've come to in the topic. Sorry, in the course of talking about this.
Mm.
That's what you're trying to discover almost.
Like you said your relationship between you and the topic, or like your
Yeah,
opinion.
I'll say concept. I think that's a better word. Yeah, like
Yeah.
you're not trying like it would be wrong to say that like for example that photograph that you edited that you discovered exactly what Sonder looks like because to someone else there'll be something and there'll be another picture or another way of editing it which better captures that concept perhaps. But it would be right to say that you discovered what Sonder means to you, kind of. Maybe there'd be other pictures that would also represent it, but still, right? It's like to you, this means Sonder. Like both of those, like the you and the Sonder are both very important here, if that makes sense. And that's
Yeah,
what you
and
discovered.
at the same time, like if somebody else looked at that photo specifically, they might not get the sense of Sonder when they look at it. Like if they were to
Right.
title it something, that they might as well title it something completely different, like foggy night on the
Yeah.
street, right?
They might not be thinking at all about the fact that that humans are somehow relevant in this picture. Or they might see it more from the perspective of like loneliness. Like, yeah, roughly speaking, humans are somehow involved in this picture, but I don't see them, so I feel lonely or something. I
Yeah.
don't know, right? So like, it might mean something else to them. Right. Yeah. So that relationship, I think, between the individual and the concept is very important with art.
So do you think when somebody practices their art, they're trying to navigate that relationship between themselves and the concept? They're trying to like process their perspective or like yeah, their perspective with that concept. Because that's kind of what I was thinking about going into this discussion. Like I mentioned at the beginning that you're trying to process some thought or some kind
Yeah.
of subliminal emotion that you haven't quite brought to the surface. But yeah, so you're saying that it's that concept that you're trying to reach, and then through the process of art here, you make that connection.
Yeah. That it's like it is the connection itself or the relationship itself which you're after. Um, because again, like if me and you are both given a certain title and we're both told to paint something that represents that title to us, then we'll come up with different paintings. And so it's like there's me, there's the topic, and then the painting that I painted is in some sense between me and that topic. And the painting that you painted is between you and that topic. Like it exists in that kind of
Mm,
intermediate space, you know? Um,
right. So it itself is that connection between you and the concept.
yeah. Like it's trying to paint something or produce art is so different from like trying to answer a well-defined math question, right? Like, what is this plus this? There's literally no individuality in the process of something like that, of like trying to answer a question like that, like an arithmetic question. Like whether I do it or you do it or a calculator does it, it's like all that really matters in the end is the answer. And the fact that we can say there's one and only one right answer means that it doesn't matter who came up with that answer or how long it took them or whatever. The answer
Yeah.
is what matters, right? Whereas here it's like it's not the topic itself that matters. It is what I feel about it or what you feel about it. It's almost like the themselves are not well defined. Like what does sadness look like? It's not going to look the same to everyone. And but how what it looks like to me and what it looks like to you will be different, but they'll both be correct from our own perspectives, right?
Do you
So
think so do you think that when you are trying to complete that process of art, do you think that you always know the concept and you're trying to forge the connection? Or sometimes you don't know the concept, you're just trying to figure out, you're just trying to process those underlying thoughts or emotions, and then by doing that, by trying to sort that out, you come to some concept that those thoughts connect to.
So I guess like going back to your photograph example, like you didn't have the concept of Sonder in your mind at first, right? Like it emerged
Yeah.
in the process. So that was almost like you're still discovering that relationship, but from a different kind of order, or in terms of like how things panned out, right? It's not like okay, you exist, and then the topic exists, and then you're trying to forge that connection. No, it's like you're just trying to create something. You didn't really know which way it's going, and then at some point it pointed to Sonder, right? And then you
Mm.
realized this is like it's like you started almost with a relationship, and then you realize it's a relationship between you and something. You discovered what that something is. I guess that would be more like you're wandering around in a forest, just going whichever way you feel like, and then eventually you end up somewhere, and you're like, oh, like, oh, this is where this path took me. But it's not important. It's not like you knew the destination and you're trying to forge the path from you to the destination. It's like you started with the path, and that led you to a certain
Yeah.
destination. But someone could very well take a different path and end up at the same destination, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think a good analog for this is journaling, because with the journaling, it's not so much that you're trying to write about a topic. You are just trying to put your thoughts into words, right? And there's a kind of you could in some way you could say that's a form of art. You're trying to process something and trying to forge some kind of connection, but you don't know what that connection is leading to. Like you don't know the end concept. And so when
Mm-hmm.
you do like when you journal, when you kind of write out your thoughts on paper, you look at that writing, and then that helps you kind of, um, better articulate what is kind of running around in your head, to yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so I think
So,
with art, it seems like there's a similar mechanism going on, but something it's a mechanism that's similar, but it's happening in a more indirect or unobvious way. It's at least something that
mm-hmm. Yeah.
you can't necessarily put into words, right? Like journaling is itself putting stuff into words. But art is a similar mechanism that might not use words at all. It's more about the essence and the emotions that you're trying to figure out.
Yeah. So I think like any art form that involves words is like inherently kind of different from those that don't involve words. But like I think it's very interesting. I think there's still a lot of room for, of course, there's a lot of room for creativity with words, but like there's a different kind of quality to it. It's a somehow a bit more well defined. I have more to say about so I have more to say about like the idea of creativity with words, if that makes sense. Like with whether it's like writing a book or poetry or that kind of thing. And I also have more to say kind of about like when you're talking about journaling, right? Like the idea of like trying to organize your thoughts and stuff. Maybe they're kind of the same topic, maybe they're not. And I think it's actually worth like if we want like having a whole separate episode on that kind of thing. But I think it's a distinct enough thing to justify that. Um,
Hmm.
yeah. On the topic at hand, I'd say I feel like I have like at least for myself a fairly satisfactory conclusion at this point. Uh, I don't know about
So what
you
would you
if there's
say?
still some.
What would you say is the purpose of art to the individual after having this discussion?
So it, it's almost hard to phrase exactly because like there's kind of different cases. But first of all, I would rule out things like portraits and things where you're trying to mimic something that already exists as faithfully as possible. Um, and after ruling that out, if we look at other kinds of art where there's at least some creativity involved, I would say that it is the process of discovering your relationship with a concept, but not necessarily in that order. Or sorry, not necessarily in the order of starting with the concept and then trying to discover the relationship. It can be that you start with you're producing something which turns out to be the relationship between you and a concept, and you didn't have that concept in mind at first. But in the end, what you discover is this is what this concept means to me. So you discover that relationship between yourself and that concept.
Okay, I think that mostly captures what I think. Although for me, there's also, yeah, I think okay, I think that mostly captures it. I was just gonna say like something about the process of art. It brings forth even if there is even if there is no concept sometimes to relate to forge a connection with. Sometimes it kind of organizes things inside your head. Whether that be like it takes away like noise from your head, so things that are not
Okay, yeah.
useful, it kind of takes them out of the equation. And then the subset of thoughts or emotions that are important, those might connect to a concept. So in some way,
Right.
I think like what you're getting at is like that subset situation where um, you eventually get to a concept, and then you organize your thoughts such that it forges a bridge to that concept, and then the art that is produced is that bridge itself. But then I think
Yeah.
like in order to do that, sometimes you have to like discard certain thoughts and certain things in your head to kind of uncover the connection, so to speak.
Right. Okay. I have a vague sense of what you mean. It, this could even this could also be something that if you want to
So
discuss
let me
more,
okay
we could.
one
Or if
more
you
one
feel like
more
sure,
example
sure.
because I know this is like really abstract and it's hard to put
Yeah.
into words because this isn't something that is done through words in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So again, photography, sorry, but this is like the main kind of art I do,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's
I
what
think
I
it's
can
fine.
draw from. So when I say like discarding certain thoughts or emotions, let me kind of tell you what that looks like with editing photos. Again, going back to Sonder, so sometimes like I'll emphasize, like I'll look at the photo in the process of editing, and then I'll see like okay, what area of the photo is well emphasized. Like is this part of the photo looking like what I think Sonder should look like, right? This is past the point of clarity. Once I hit the point of clarity, I'm trying to emphasize the feeling of Sonder, right?
Right.
And then so if it doesn't match that feeling, then it'll get discarded, right? So you're kind of digging into the photo
Mm-hmm.
and trying to emphasize that feeling of Sonder. And then,
Okay.
but sometimes I think so. Even before that point of clarity, right? There is some sense of like because there's some kind of concept there, but you haven't quite figured it out, and you're not immediately going towards emphasizing that feeling, right? But it's still there, right? Before the point of clarity, and you're trying to like figure that out. So even then, you have a sense of what kind of feels right and what doesn't. And so
Yeah.
with the Sonder photo again, when I would be editing it, sometimes I would look at the photo and think, this thing like this light, for example. There's a lot of lights in the photo, and I think like, okay, that light is looking too bright. Not just like in the physical sense, like I'm not just thinking like it's
Yeah. Yeah.
physically too bright, like it doesn't make any sense, but more so like it's not quite giving off that feeling that I'm trying to like that I'm kind of working towards, even if I don't know I'm working towards Sonder,
Oh, okay. I
right?
see what you mean. Yeah.
And then once I've
Right.
kind of fixed that, I wouldn't say mistake, but like I fixed that kind of appearance. Once I've maybe dimmed down the light or done something else to it, it kind of better appropriates that feeling that I'm trying to work towards. And then eventually, at some point, I'm like, oh, I think I'm kind of getting the feeling, and that feeling is Sonder, right? And then after everything downstream of
Right.
that is basically, yeah, let's just further emphasize this concept.
Yeah. It's almost like afterwards the unconscious is working and then the conscious takes over. I feel like I have more to say about this also, or even like I almost want to like interview you specifically about photography because like clearly you've dealt with it a lot, not just in the like going through the motions, but actually like thinking about how it makes you feel and that kind of thing, right?
So I will I will caveat this with saying not all of my photos are trying to be deep. Okay,
Yeah.
so some photos are just literally just photos. Like there'll be a
Yeah.
photo of a friend just sitting down somewhere, or they're just a photo of a skyscraper, right? But like
Right.
more
You just see
recently,
something you just want to capture. Yeah.
yeah, and but like I think more recently, I'm getting into like more of the artistic side, like trying to like tinker with a concept or an emotion, and I'm trying to like make the photos a little more immersive. So the more recent photos, yeah, I think this kind of narrative applies. Not so much the older photos.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like I said, there's like uh art where you're trying to mimic something that exists. There's art where you're trying to, it's about your impression and stuff. So, of course, it's like there's a big caveat throughout this whole episode, I'd say, but I think we've done a good job at like kind of clarifying that. So no one's gonna say that, yeah, a picture of a chair is necessarily like really deep or something.
It's like it's like oh, the curtains were blue, like when your
Yeah,
English teacher is reading a short story and short story writes, the author writes, yeah, the curtains are blue, and then the English teacher's like, oh, they're blue because he's having like the character's having a bad day. or they're sad.
And
But then in reality, it's just the curtains are blue. Like nothing
the
else is
curtains are
going
just
on.
they're blue. Damn it! Like that's it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But okay, so I need to just to end. I
Yeah.
think we need to like step back and think whether what we're saying after going so deep into it is like is there something there, or are we just kind of making patterns that don't actually exist? Like
Ah.
kind of see whether our BS detector is picking something up or not.
Okay. No, I stand by whatever I said. That's for sure.
Okay.
Because it's like we're talking about art. You know, I would argue, and this is meta. Hey, if art can be subjective, then our interpretation of what it means is itself kind of subjective too. You know, yeah, it's like this is not the kind of thing where you'll have like well-defined answers like this is what art means, that's what art means. The process of finding out what art means to you, who knows? Maybe that itself is art at the most philosophical level. I don't know. So, yeah, the idea I came up with makes sense to me, and so I think that's good enough.
Okay. Yeah, I think like this topic has been on my mind also perhaps kind of in a meta way. It's been floating around my mind, and I thought I'd use this episode to like figure it out. So, in a way, even like this episode itself is kind
Yeah, yeah,
of showing that process in action.
exactly. It's a bit more
I
well
think I
defined because
broadly
like we have a topic, but still, yeah, it's
Yeah, and I think I broadly agree with what I'm saying. I'm a little
yeah,
skeptical, but it's just like through my experience with photography and even this podcast for that matter, like I've seen this
yeah,
mechanism play out. So I think there's
right,
something there.
yeah, yeah. I don't think our BS detectors are going off on this one.
Okay. Cool. So I'm reading 54 minutes. I think it's a good
Yeah,
time to wrap it up, and then maybe we can
yeah,
like
yeah.
branch this off into another episode next time.
Yeah, exactly. There's like always time to talk more about this kind of stuff. All right then. Uh, signing off on this is literally our first episode of 2022. That's insane. Yeah, signing off.
Signing off. Welcome to 2022. See you
Yeah.
next episode, whatever that is. Don't worry, it'll be
Bye.
soon.
Inshallah. I had to say that, sir. Okay. Bye.